You are most welcome to another exciting review of Failing Forward by John C. Maxwell. All right, please sit back, relax, because in today's review, we are in for an interesting one, right? So, today we're going to be looking at chapter 4 of Failing Forward, which is titled You Are Too Old to Cry, but It Hurts Too Much to Laugh. We have something interesting in this review. Fear makes come true that which one is afraid of, says Viktor Frankl. All right. So, this chapter 4, opens with the story of the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers are known to be the inventors of the airplane, but then they are not actually the first inventors of the airplane, even though many people credit this to them. Just about everyone has heard of the Wright brothers, the bicycle mechanics who pioneered manned motorized flights in the first part of the 20th century. The circumstances surrounding Orville and Wilbur Wright's first flight on December 17, 1903, make an interesting story. It is certainly a story that illustrates how to fail forward. But what you may not know is that prior to that day, the Wrights, unknowns with no university education, they had no university education, they were not leaders in aviation, they were not even known, they were not popular. But then another man was expected to put the first airplane in the air. So this man was actually supposed to get the credit for flying the first airplane. But he had a very interesting, not too good of a story that made him not to be credited for this. And instead of him, the Wright brothers are credited for flying the first airplane. So what happened to this man? His name was Dr. Samuel P. Langley, and he was a respected former professor of mathematics and astronomy, right? He was an accomplished thinker, scientist, and inventor. He published several books. And like in the mid 1890s, he had done extensive experiments with large unmanned plane models, and he had achieved a high degree of success. So he was confident that he should be able to fly an airplane. So in 1898, he approached the US War Department for funding to design and build an airplane. And the department gave him a commission funding of $50,000, which was a very huge amount. As of that time, it was really huge. So he went straight to work. He started building his airplane. He started doing it. He was really working hard. And by the year 1901, he had successfully tested this airplane, which was meant to be the first in history, with the help of an engineer called Charles Manley. So the day came that they were supposed to test this airplane. Onlookers were there, journalists were there, everybody were there to see, oh, okay, this thing is about to take off from the ground and go into space, right? So this was to happen on the 8th of October, 1903. His many years of hard work was supposed to come to fruition. And as people were looking and they got into the pilot seat to now fly this airplane, what happened? The plane, which they named the Great Aerodrome, came down, landed into a river, and it was a total disaster. It went down into water 50 yards away from a boat. It was a total disaster. So this guy, Professor Langley, faced fierce, brutal criticism. The newspapers had so many terrible things to write about him. But then he did not give up because of this. He was not deterred by this failure. he decided that he was not going to allow these criticisms to get to him. So 8 weeks later, in early December, remember that the first time he tried to launch his airplane was on the 8th of October. So 8 weeks later, in early December, he decided that they were ready to make another attempt together with Charles, and they made some modification to their airplane. They did all that they knew to do to make sure that the disaster that happened the first time did not repeat itself. Alas, when they tried to fly this plane again, disaster struck. This time around, the plane, the moment it took off, came down, it was facing down and it landed in a river. His associate, Charles Manley, nearly died as a result of this. He nearly died. So, again, he faced criticism. The criticism was so fierce. The New York Times had so many terrible things to write about him. In fact, they said, "We hope that Professor Langley will not put his substantial greatness as a scientist in further peril by continuing to waste his time and the money involved in further airship experiments." Langley said afterwards, he said, "I have brought to a close the portion of the work which seemed to be specially mine, the demonstration of the practicality of mechanical flight." To cut the long story short, this guy gave up. He felt defeated. He was demoralized and he gave up. He wouldn't improve on his airplane. He wouldn't perform another experiment. And that was the end of the pursuit of trying to fly an airplane. Not long after that, he became sick and I think he got stroke. Let me see. He became sick, he got stroke, and then a year later, he died. So this is where the Wright brothers now come in. The Wright brothers that people did not know. Days after Professor Langley gave up, the Wright brothers, Orville and Wilbur, they were not educated, they were not known, they were not popular, they had no funding from the government, nothing. They flew their own plane just a few days after Professor Langley, who was popular, who was an accomplished scientist, inventor. Days after he gave up, the Wright brothers, I'm emphasizing this so that you know that it is not by education, it is not by funding, it is not by popularity. It is by determination. It is by you not giving up. It is by you failing forward. Wilbur and Orville Wright, they flew their airplane. So there are two perspectives to this thing. Author J.I. Packer states that a moment of conscious triumph makes one feel that after this, after you have attained triumph, that nothing else will matter. You will keep on triumphing. That is one perspective. Another perspective is that a moment of realized disaster makes one feel that this is the end of everything. But neither the feeling of triumph or disaster is realistic, right? None of them is realistic. It depends on the meaning, the interpretation that you give to your triumph, whether after attaining that triumph, you want to relax and rest on your oars, or whether you have encountered a disaster, you feel that that is the end of everything. You don't want to try again. So the Wright brothers, after they flew the airplane, they did not rest on their success. They did not allow this triumph to get to them. The rush of their achievements in December of 1903 did not make them think that they had arrived. They continued to experiment. They continued working, even though people did not know them. But by their continuous hard work, they later became known. They were acknowledged. They were celebrated, right? They were celebrated. And even as of today, school children would celebrate the Wright brothers. Everybody acknowledged them, credits the flying of the first airplane to the Wright brothers. But people hardly remember Professor Langley, who first attempted to do it. And this was because Professor Langley gave up. 2 years after he abandoned his experiment, he suffered a stroke, and after a year, he died. Now, Let's look at this subheading that says, when failure gets you by the heart. What happened in the life of Samuel Langley occurs in the lives of too many people today. They allow failure to get the better part of them emotionally, and it stops them from achieving their dreams. Let's face it, failure can be very painful, sometimes physically and even at other times emotionally. In fact, more times emotionally, sometimes psychologically too. It is very, very painful. When you are now criticized on top of that, that is even a worse feeling. If you fail and you lick your wounds quietly, it is even better. But when you fail and people are now criticizing you, they're insulting you, abusing you for that, that is like adding insult to your injury, right? When people now try to ridicule you. So the first important step in weathering failure is learning not to personalize it. Yesterday we talked about removing you from failure. Don't be attached to failure. View failure as an isolated event. View it as one of those things that happen in life. So don't personalize it. Don't take it too personally. Make sure you know that your failure does not make you a failure until you accept defeat and you say, yes, you're a failure. You are not a failure. That thing that did not work out is just one event in your life. And if you don't sit there, you can still bounce back, right? There is more to that. For many people, the pain of failure leads to fear of failure. And they become like the person who says, I am too old to cry, but it hurts too much to laugh. So they end up not doing anything. They neither cry nor laugh. They just sit there. This means that they neither try, right, nor do anything. They are just in the middle. They just do nothing. In simple terms, they do nothing. It's either you're crying or you're laughing. There is no vacuum in life. There is no sitting on the fence. If you are sitting on the fence, then you're not making any progress. That's why many people get stuck in the fear cycle. And if fear overcomes you, it's almost impossible to fail forward. To fail forward is to keep moving on, to keep making progress, in spite of the fact that you have encountered failure. Now, a cycle you don't want to ride. Take a look at what typically happens to someone who is unable to overcome the fear of failure, and the person gets stuck in the fear of failure. Prior negative experiences can often make people to develop the fear of failure. If you have tried to do something before and you did not succeed, now that fear may keep you from trying again, from moving ahead. For example, let's say somebody experienced failure as a child, trying to sell candy or trying to sell books, for example, knocking from door to door so that the person can raise money to go to school. But then the fear of rejection, because as the person is knocking on doors, people are saying, oh, sorry, I'm not buying books. Oh, sorry, I'm not buying. Oh, stop knocking on my door. I'm not interested. You know, people can be so harsh, right? If you don't put yourself in the shoes of other people, you can react harshly to people who are just trying to hustle, who are just trying to get their daily bread, instead of you to be kind to them. It was when I started selling that I realized this truth that, oh, it's not so easy after all. We need to be very kind to entrepreneurs, you know, people who are trying to sell stuff, instead of being harsh to them and saying, I'm not interested, or just shouting them down. There is a nicer way to say it so that they don't feel bad, because at the end of the day, everybody is just trying to make ends meet. Everybody is trying to hustle. So be kinder to them. So this person that we're talking about, who is trying to sell books or candy from door to door, if the person experiences so much rejection, the moment the person becomes an adult and this person is faced with a similar situation, maybe to start selling something, or even to pastor a church, or even to become the head of an organization, if this fear that this person experienced in his childhood is not overcome, then the fear may regenerate. The person may cast his mind back and the memories will start flashing down to say, hey, I was rejected when I tried selling as a child. So that fear, the fear of rejection, will create inaction. Now, this person does not want to try. The person does not want to act. He doesn't want to gain personal, and if the person doesn't act, he doesn't gain personal experience in that situation, which is key to learning and overcoming that rejection. The moment you relax to say, oh, because I've been rejected before, I'm not going to try, then you're going to be shortchanging yourself, because you will never overcome that fear of rejection. And if you don't overcome it, if you don't try regardless, you will keep having that cold feet that will make you not to try. If you don't try, you're not going to act, then you're not going to gain experience. If you don't gain experience, you don't become competent. You never overcome that fear. So the longer that fear remains unchecked, the harder it becomes to break the cycle. So even if you have faced any rejection, don't wallow in it. Brace up, bounce back, and try again. The moment you keep trying again, you keep getting confident to keep trying, and before you know it, rejection is not going to be anything to you anymore. You are not going to be so afraid anymore. The fear of failure stops forward progress. The inaction that results when people are stuck in the fear cycle takes so many forms, but the author is going to give us just 3 of these forms. What happens when people refuse to move forward and they allow themselves to be stuck in the fear of failure? One thing that can happen is paralysis. For some people, fear of failure brings about absolute paralysis, not physical paralysis. They are crippled in their minds, they are crippled mentally, psychologically, emotionally. They become crippled, they become paralyzed. They stop trying to do anything that might lead to failure. They would rather stay in their comfort zone. They don't want to experience failure again. And so this is a form of paralysis. President Harry S. Truman offered his opinion. He said, the worst danger we face is the danger of being paralyzed by doubts and fears. This danger is brought on by those who abandon faith and sneer at hope. It is brought on by those who spread cynicism, cynicism and distrust. We talked about the chicken littles in Rich Dad Poor Dad. People would just come and discourage you. They've never tried what you want to try, but they will tell you 1,001 reasons why what you want to do is not going to work. And if you don't have a mind of your own, you're going to listen to them. That is how they will discourage you. They will blind you to the great chance to do good for all mankind. People whose fear paralyzes them give up any hope of moving forward. The number 2 thing is procrastination. Other people maintain the hope of progress, but they never get around to following through. Someone once called procrastination the fertilizer that makes difficulties grow. Victor Kiam stated it even more strongly. He called it opportunity's natural assassin. Procrastination is a thief of time. It will steal from you. You will never do what you so desire to do. You keep saying, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it next week. Today is not the right time. Let me push it to next year. We're already in November. January will be a good time to start. Guess what? When January comes, you are still not starting. You're still not doing anything. Procrastination steals a person's time, productivity, and potential. As President John F. Kennedy said, Joy, please close this door. There are risks and costs to a program of action, but they are far less than the long-range risks and costs of comfortable inaction. Procrastination is too high a cost or a price to pay for fear of failure. So you have to get up and do what you have to do. The third characteristic of the fear of failure and how it stops progress is purposelessness. There are some people who have no purpose in life. They just do things. Traveled out of Nigeria to go for my postgraduate studies, and a friend of mine, after hearing that, I traveled out, reached out to me and said, oh, Lady, I also want to travel out, can you help me? I said, no, I also, hustle this thing on my own, blah, blah, blah. And then I asked him, okay, why do you want to travel out? When you get here, what do you want to come and do? Because for me, I came to study. So you also need to have a purpose. What do you want to come and do? And he said, anything obtainable, I'm going to do. And he actually applied for a study visa, even though he had no intention of studying. He just wanted to use that as a route to leave Nigeria. And then when he got to school, he did not go. Job, he did not find. You know, he became purposeless. I don't know what later happened to him. I knew that he spent some time, maybe a few years, and I stopped hearing from him. This is a good example of not having a purpose in life. Some people will say, I just want to travel, or whatever they are doing, they're just going to. No, this is not a good way to live your life. You must have a purpose, an objective. What do I want to achieve? What actually do I want? So that you can go after that thing. If you don't know what you want, everything is going to look like it. Everything that you are offered is going to look like it. And then at the end of the day, you're just moving from pillar to post. You're not achieving anything. You are like a rolling stone that gathers no moss. At the end of 5 years, you cannot say, this is what I achieved, because you did not set out to achieve anything in the first place. You can only say, oh, I achieved this, if that was the objective that you had in the beginning, right? So stop being purposeless. Tom Peters said In Search of Excellence, in his book that he co-authored, In Search of Excellence, emphasized that there is nothing more useless than someone who comes to the end of the day and congratulates himself, saying, well, I made it through the day without screwing up. They are just happy that they didn't do anything wrong, you know. And this is a very safe way to live. And this safe way of living is not going to get you anywhere. You're not going to make progress in life if you are keeping it safe. After all, I didn't screw it up. You should even be happy that you made a mistake. You learned something. That is how people grow. Yet, that's what many people who fear failure do. Rather than pursue worthy objectives, they avoid the pain of making mistakes. And in the midst of that transition, they lose sight of any sense of purpose that they might have once possessed. They're just going through life, avoiding mistakes. Come and invest. No. Come, go and learn. Go and study. No. Come and try this business. No. They never want to make mistakes. How do you learn if you don't make mistakes? As fear of failure and the resulting inactivity compound, a person in the fear cycle exhibits additional negative side effects. Number one is self-pity. He feels sorry for himself, you know, and as time goes on, he takes less responsibility for his inactivity and starts thinking of himself as a victim. If not that I was born as a Nigerian, if not that I'm an African, what a pity. I would have become a millionaire by now. Self-pity. They wallow in it. They see a very strong reason why that should be justified. Number two is excuses. A person can fall down many times, but it won't be a failure until he says that somebody pushed him. Own your mistake. Own your failures. Stop blaming other people. Your failure is yours, your success is yours. Irrespective of how you try to blame other people. Some people will blame their parents. If my parents are training well, okay, they did their own best. They did what they knew to do, right? If they knew better, maybe they would have done better. Now that your parents have given birth to you, you are an adult. Now, give birth to yourself. Undergo the process of rebirth. Some people will blame the government. Oh, what a useless government. It is such a tragedy if you allow the government to control your destiny. Because even the government is sometimes clueless. They don't know what they are doing. Sometimes they are greedy. They are just wicked. They don't care about you. So it is better you take your own destiny in your own hands and stop waiting for a bunch of individuals who are clueless, who are greedy, who are selfish and wicked to dictate the way that your life will go. That is a big mistake to make in life. A person can break out of the fear of cycle only by taking personal responsibility for his inaction. Another thing is misused energy. They focus their energy on the wrong things because they allow fear to divide their mind. And so they lose focus. They have no direction. Another negative thing that they exhibit is hopelessness. As long as there's life, there is hope. The moment you lose hope, then the brightness of the future is gone. So keep hope alive, no matter what may be going on right now. Keep hope alive. Now let's break the cycle. People who want to get out of the fear cycle often spend time feeling guilty for their inability to change. But one of the reasons they are stuck in the fear cycle is that they focus their energy on the wrong part of the cycle. Since they know that fear got the cycle going, they believe that they have to eliminate fear to break the cycle. But then, most people are unable to eliminate fear because you cannot avoid fear. It is a part of life. There is no magic potion that can take fear away. As long as you're a human being, you're going to feel fear. So don't wait for motivation to keep you going. To conquer fear, you have to feel the fear and take action anyway. Like Joyce Myers wrote in her book, Do It Afraid. You have to do it afraid. The fear is there, but you're taking action. You're still moving ahead. You're anxious, you're nervous, but you're making progress regardless of that. So stop waiting for motivation. Motivation is like a trap. The moment you start doing something, that is when your motivation will come. Internal motivation, the drive to continue. So act. Whether it is you, whatever it is, you know you should do it. Get moving, build momentum, make mistakes, and move on. A life spent in making mistakes is not only more honorable, but more useful than a life spent doing nothing. It is better to try something and make mistakes than to sit back, fold your arms, and do nothing. You're not going to make progress that way. Because you need to recognize that you spend much of your life making mistakes, doing things wrong, and that is how you learn. The bad news is that if you've been inactive for a long time, getting started is hard to do. The good news is that as soon as you start moving, it gets easier. We once learned in one of the previous books that we reviewed that the starting point is always the hardest. But once you start, you get that energy, that momentum to keep on moving. If you take action and keep making mistakes, you gain experience. That is why President Theodore Roosevelt said, "He who makes no mistakes makes no progress." That experience eventually brings competence, and you make fewer mistakes. The more you go, the fewer the mistakes that you make. As a result, your fear becomes less paralyzing. But the whole cycle breaking process starts with action. Just do it. Just start. You must act your way into feeling and not wait for positive emotions to carry you forward. There's an African proverb, that is captured here, and I like this. I want you to listen. This proverb says, every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It knows that it must run faster than the fastest lion or it will be killed. Every morning, a lion wakes up. It knows that it must outrun the slowest gazelle or it will starve to death. It doesn't matter whether you're a lion or a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you had better be running. Yes, you had better be running. Whether you're slow or you're fast, whether you're a lion, a gazelle, or a snail, or a cheetah, the moment the sun is up, the moment you wake up in the morning, you had better start running. You had better start moving. You had better start doing something. Start taking action. If you have always had a hard time failing forward, then you have to get yourself moving. It doesn't matter what has stopped you or how long you have been inactive. The only way to break the cycle is to face your fear and take action, even though it may seem small or insignificant. Right? Start doing something, no matter how small. Little drops of water make a mighty ocean. Short-term consistency, or is it long-term? Yeah, long-term consistency, doing little things per time, but consistently will beat long-term, or will beat short-term intensity. Doing something every day for 5 minutes, every single day, is better than doing something once every 3 months, right? So you had better start doing something. And you know yourself, you are the type that does not easily get motivated. So it is better you put in little effort per time. Whether you want to start reading, or you want to start saving or investing, or you want to go to school, it is better you start early and be doing it little by little. Even the best get stuck sometimes. Many unsuccessful people get stuck in the fear cycle. But the same thing happens to high achievers. There's a story here of a man. We're looking at his life briefly. He was a composer, a music composer named George Frederick Handel. His dad wanted him to be a lawyer, but then he had flair for music from a very young age, right? And so he tilted towards music. By the age of 16, he held the post of church organist in a church. A year later, he became a violinist and a harpsichordist, By the age of 21, he was a keyboard virtuoso. And when he turned to composing, he gained immediate fame. And he was soon appointed Kapellmeister conductor. Those of you that are into music, you know this better, right? And he moved to England. He became successful. He became popular. And by the time he was 40, he was world famous. But then he had a reversal of fortune. Things did not keep on going well for him because when he got to England, he faced considerable adversity. The competition was fierce with English composers. And a time came when he would organize shows and concerts. People would not show up. And after a while, he was heavily indebted. He was sick. His music career started nosediving, right? He'd faced so many events of failure. The pain of rejection and failure was difficult to bear, especially following his previous success. If he had not been successful before, it would even have been better, right? But we're talking of somebody who was popular, who was doing well, and all of a sudden, he started experiencing a decline in success. His problems were compounded by failing health. He suffered a seizure or stroke, which left his right arm limp and caused him to lose the use of 4 fingers on his right hand. Although he recovered, he remained despondent. And by the year 1741, Mr. Handel decided that it was time to retire, even though he was just 56 at that time. He was still young, right? But he was discouraged. He was miserable. He was consumed with death. And he felt that he would land in debtor's prison. So on April 8th, in 1741, he gave what is considered his farewell concert. Disappointed and filled with self-pity, Mr. Handel gave up. But that is not the end of his story. His story ended well. Then, in August of that same year, that same 1741, something incredible happened. A wealthy friend of his named Charles Jennings visited him and gave him a libretto based on the life of Christ. A libretto is like a music book, And he became interested in this work. And that stirred up inspiration in him. He got into action and he started writing. He was writing, and the moment he started writing, it was as if the floodgate of heaven, of the inspiration, was opened over him. And he continued to write, and this cycle of inactivity, of discouragement, of misery was broken in his life. And for 21 days, he wrote almost non-stop. Then he spent another 2 days creating the orchestration. In 24 days, he had completed the 260-page manuscript. He called this piece Messiah. Today, Handel's Messiah is considered a masterpiece and the culmination of the composer's work. In fact, Sir Newman Flower, one of Handel's biographers, said of the writing of Messiah, he said, "Considering the immensity of the work and the short time involved, it will remain perhaps forever the greatest feat in the whole history of music composition." I like the way his story ended. When it comes to getting over the emotional hurt of failure, it really doesn't matter how good or bad your personal history is. You may have failed before. You may have succeeded before as well. And now it looks as if you're failing. It doesn't matter what your history is. The only thing that matters is that you face your fear and get going. Do that, and you give yourself the opportunity to learn how to fail forward. One of the characteristics of those who fail forward is that they bounce back from any kind of misfortune. They don't remain there. They don't allow themselves to be dejected and rejected. They don't feel defeated. They bounce back. The only way to get over your fear is to take action. So take action. Maybe you've given up on any project or anything in your life. Now go over it. If you have this book, there are some questions that you need to answer, right? Answer this question. These questions. Examine what you are afraid of. Take notes of those things that have kept you in the same spot. Right? Write down all the fears associated with what you want to do. Is it that you want to start a business, you're afraid that it may not do well, and things like that. Tell yourself the truth. Get into a meeting with yourself. Overcome your fear. Even if you may not even be able to fully overcome it, because the fear will always be there. As you think that you have overcome one, another one is going to come, right? As you move forward in life. But don't ever allow fear to keep you down. Don't ever procrastinate. Don't allow fear to paralyze you. Don't feel purposeless in life. Get up. Do what you need to do. Little steps per time will get you closer to your dream. As long as there is life, there is hope. Keep failing forward, keep making progress, and before you know it, you're going to be celebrated. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've come to the end of chapter 4 of Failing Forward by John C. Maxwell, right? Tomorrow we're going to look at chapter 5, which is titled Find the Exit of the Failure Freeway. Thank you for tuning in. Please don't forget to like this video. Drop all of your comments. Please subscribe to this channel. In case you are yet to subscribe, I remain Olaide Ogbaje, also known as First Lady, and on this channel, I inspire you to live intentionally. I'll come your way again tomorrow by God's grace, 9:30 p.m. West African time. Until then, be intentional. Bye.